Welcome to my podcast. This is Mary Turderoff, and you are listening to Jump In with Mary. Hello, everyone. Today, my guest is a woman who truly defies all odds. She slays dragons on the daily. She's a professor in English Lit at Pasadena City College with a long waiting list out the door, including me as one of her lucky students. She is the LA chapter coordinator of the International Armenian Literary Alliance, the vice president of the Joint Armenian Network at PCC. By God, this list does not end. She literally sent me a 9-page resume I could hardly get through, guys. And aside from all that jazz, she's the mom of 2 brilliant children who I am lucky enough to know, and she is a cancer survivor. Diagnosed at 37, she punched this tumor in the face. She decided to get her doctorate from UCLA. She wrote and submitted her dissertation during radiation treatment and post-surgery. Now more than ever, Dr. Tanya Baronian is on top of her A game. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much for that beautiful welcoming words, introduction.
That was only 10% of all the things you've done, but just wanted to give listeners a glimpse into the gist of who you are. So let's dive in. You had a really shocking journey at the age of 37. Can you open up a little bit about finding out and what that whirlwind of a situation was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I was 37 when I found the tumor, but I wasn't diagnosed till I was 39.
Okay.
So I was misdiagnosed. So I don't know, how in-depth should I go with this in terms of the how I found it, but I guess I'll give you a tidbit. I noticed a lump on my neck. And I think I noticed it after going to the gym. So in some ways, the gym saved my life. I hated the gym previously. I liked getting my exercise through sports. So I started to go to the gym because post 2 children, you're like, I need to get my life and my body back into order. So I started to go. And in the first couple of weeks, I noticed that there was a pain in my neck. And I was like, oh my God, what is this pain? And at first I thought it was because of my height. I'm so short. I thought that when I was on the elliptical machine, the machine in ratio to where the TV is, I thought I was straining my neck to look at the TV in the way that it was set up, the elliptical versus where they have the screens hanging.
So it didn't feel like unusual. It's just like, okay.
It did feel like I'm straining my neck to turn to look at the TV while I'm on the machine. So at first I thought I must have strained my neck. Why? Because it's hurting. But then it wouldn't go away for like a good couple of weeks. And I'm like, well, it's not going away. And I can now feel a bump. And so I went to an oncologist who said, it might be a pinched nerve. Have you been going to the gym? And I said, oh my God, yes, it was such a coincidence. And he said, well, maybe you strained yourself. And I said, oh my God, that makes so much sense because of the whole TV and elliptical situation. And then I just figured, well, I went to an oncologist. I did my due diligence. And it's a pinched nerve, and it felt like a pinched nerve. And so that was in May of 2019.
So at this point, you're 37, 30. It's been like
37.
a year. So you waited a year.
No,
okay.
I went immediately in the same month that I found. I think I started working out at the gym in April, and in May I went to the oncologist.
But then you were comforted, and you're thinking it's fine, and so you move on with your life, right?
Move on with your life. So then in early 2020, COVID.
Okay.
No one's going to the doctor. In the back of my mind, I was comforted with, I went to an oncologist who I trust. And, but then I kept thinking, like, how long can you have a pinched nerve for? And how long can you have a knot? Because now it felt like it was a knot because it's a tumor, right?
Could you see it externally?
Yes, you can.
So it's protruding out of your neck.
It was. And you could feel it very easily. You could see it and you could feel it just by placing your hand. It was very, very easy to see and locate, etc.
So now we're in COVID and this problem hasn't gone away.
Right.
Okay.
But then I was like, not following up with it because it's COVID.
Yeah.
And so.
But it's getting worse.
No, it's staying the same.
Okay.
It's just not going away.
Okay.
And so 2 years out, so now we're in May of 2021. Right?
Okay.
2021, I see that same oncologist again. And I said, how do I still have a pinched nerve? It's been 2 years.
Which basically means the tumor's been sitting there for 2 years.
Sitting there for 2 years.
Okay.
But what I think happened is the gym had it like pop out of its location, like straining the neck, which is why I think like going to the gym was a blessing in disguise for me, because I don't know how else would it have protruded out. Probably it would have been too late by the time it was protruding out, like if it grew and grew. So
in COVID, you do end up going back to the same oncologist.
But 2 years after I'd initially seen him.
Wow.
Because I was like, okay, how long can I wait now? It's not going away. And he said, you know what? Why don't you go to your primary and ask him for an ultrasound and let them see what it is? But he didn't seem concerned. And I don't blame him, because it's a very, very rare tumor. And it's even more rare for people my age to have developed it.
Right.
And so I went to the physician, and from there I pushed him to do an ultrasound. He also was like, oh, it's nothing. And I said, well, why don't we just ultrasound it so we know what it is?
You have to really advocate for it,
I
right?
had to advocate very hard. And from May of 2021 to June of 2021 was a whirlwind of exams and MRIs, ultrasound, biopsy, diagnosis.
That's a lot. When you're that young and you're going in, it feels like sometimes, luckily I haven't had a situation like yours, but I've had to go in for like a breast exam. And I really feel like if you're under 40, you have to beg them and really push to get a lot of these exams, ultrasounds. They just kind of see your age and they see that there's a 3 in front of your age, and that's it. And they don't really want to move forward because it's unlikely.
Yeah, you're pigeonholed into some statistic.
Right, which is exactly what happened to you, it looks like. But what was the moment, you see it in movies, you hear about it. What was the moment when they deliver you the news?
No one delivered the news. I had to read the report myself.
What?
Yeah, I did.
Wait. Let's back up. You broke into the doctor's office and opened your file?
Very
I can see
surreptitiously.
I can see you doing that.
So clandestine. So I knew I think I have good like gut instinct. And after the biopsy, I'll never forget, I was like in the shower one day and I remember thinking, it's not okay. It's cancer. Like
You intuitively felt that?
I intuitively felt it. Even though the odds were very much against it. I think the statistics are something like 3% of the entire, I think it's American statistics. 3% of people in America would ever get diagnosed with this tumor. And then it was like another less than 3% that tumor. So it's less than 3% for you to have the tumor, this particular tumor. And then it's even a less than 3% that tumor could even be cancerous. So the statistics are very, very low. But I did something that I did as a child. And I think, so this is so weird. I've never said this out loud to anyone. So as a kid, when any circumstance, any situation, anything that I'd be daydreaming about I'd daydream about, like, let's say I'm going to go on a date with a guy, or like, I'm imagining the first day of going to college. Like in my head, I'd have a little like replay of what might happen. And
so like you visualize, you pre-visualize.
I'd pre-visualize and I'd kind of anticipate. And in that process of anticipation, I would determine whether it was going to go the way I imagined or not. Something like intuitively connected to what I was premeditating with what would actually happen.
Wow. Okay.
Like what I was projecting to happen and what my gut was telling me. Like there was always this moment of connection where I'm like, okay, what I've projected will happen or it won't. And I was always, I don't know if I'm able to explain this well, but I was always on point. Like in my head, if I projected what I thought would happen, in my gut, if I felt there was like a message, something's telling me, yes, it is, or no, it's not. And if my gut was like, no, it's not going to go down that way, then I knew it wouldn't go down that way.
Sounds like a mind and heart, like alignment. If the alignment is there, it's going to go your way.
I think so. And so one day when I was in the shower and I was envisioning telling actually my dissertation chair, who I was very close to, who'd been helping me with my process, who knew I was going through, I didn't tell him everything, but I was like, I had to kind of like reschedule some appointments with him. So in my head, I was like, envisioning being on our next Zoom call and telling him, oh, my biopsy was fine. I'm totally fine. And as I was envisioning that, I was like, oh my God, it's not fine. I can't imagine that conversation is going to go that way. It's not going to go that way. And in that moment, I was like, it's not, this is cancer. And I was scared. Like that moment scared me when I'm like, oh my God. And I hadn't done that, like that premeditating and that pre-thinking and pre-visualizing since I'd been like a teenager or something. Like it'd been a long time that I was like revisiting something I used to do. And then, so there was like this nostalgia in the moment of pre-thinking about it. And then all of a sudden my gut hit and I'm like, oh my God, I know that this isn't okay.
So you knew before you knew and before they told you, but then who like officially?
I did.
Tell me about that, because you always imagine the doctor's going to sit you down and tell you,
that
bring
doctor's
family.
Still not called me to tell me the results of the biopsy.
Wow.
Yeah. So
does that come from shame? Not shame, but having misdiagnosed you 2 years prior?
No, this was a different person.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. This was a surgeon who did the biopsy because an oncologist wouldn't do the surgery. You need a surgical oncologist, head and neck person to do it.
So you read a report. You pinned it down.
So I had to fight to get the report. I had to sign a release to get my own medical document. Wow. Even though I'm like, I am the person, I want you to send me the results of the report.
Right.
And they're like, well, you need to sign off on the waiver. And it was so dramatic. And I'll save you the drama. But I was at a friend's house who had also experienced pediatric cancer for their child. And I felt terrible, but I was already invited to go there, but I knew that I was going to try to get the report out on that same day. And because my City of Hope appointment was that Monday, and this was a Friday, and I called the office and I'm like, could you guys read me the report? I want the report. And they're like, well, the doctor's out for the weekend. And I'm like, how do you not tell me what my report is? And now the doctor's not there. Could you send it to me? And they're like, no, you need to sign a release. And I had to go back and forth. They emailed it. I had all kinds of like downloading apps on my phone to like sign it the proper way, blah, blah, blah. Finally, it was like right at 5 when they said the cutoff is 5. I got it in on time, all at this one friend's house. And then finally I got the email to my phone and you're like, opening up the screen and trying to read. And I read it to myself and I was like, oh my God, it says carcinoma and I have cancer.
Wow. And
yeah.
Do you just close the door in that moment and sit with yourself in a room?
No, because I was at someone else's house.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Wow, that's a lot. And I want to stay on this topic, but make like a very soft pivot because fast forwarding to the surgery, I mean, you had a really dramatic surgery. I saw your scar after surgery. It's hard to see now, thankfully, but it was massive. Like it went, help me kind of describe it. It went from like mid-skull above ear. How would you describe it? Like behind the ear or above the ear?
No, in the middle of the ear.
Starting the mid-ear, going all the way
down, kind of like not at your jawline, but like following kind of like a facelift, like through the very corner of your ear in the middle, all the way through the neck, down to like where the center of your neck would be, like the fold of your neck. In fact, the surgeon was like, I'll cut it where your neck naturally folds.
Right.
So that the incision looks like it blends with that fold. I mean, of course, she first had to go down vertical and then it went horizontal into the fold. But yeah.
But like what I'm trying to get to.
It's like an L shape.
Yeah. And what I'm trying to get to is really visual.
Yes.
And like we're going to dive into that. But just me having seen you like, and also you said facelift, like a one-sided facelift because your face was a little more caved in. They had removed something. How was it hard to come to terms with the visual of like waking up and looking at yourself in the mirror, being very young? Walk me a little bit through that. Like, what was that like?
Well, no one can prepare you for that. I knew I would joke before. I mean, so diagnosis was May. I'm sorry. Ultrasound, MRIs and stuff were in May. Diagnosis was in June. City of Hope was in June. Surgery was in July. And then radiation was the second week of September. So it was all very, very fast.
Yeah.
And I had planned for a vacation before all of this in July to Hawaii with the family. So during that trip, and we had gone with friends, I was joking and saying like, this is it. This is the last time I'm going to look normal. It's going to be like monstrous after this. I don't know what with some deformity. I don't know what it's going to look like. And then when you come out of surgery, your face, that side of your face is so swollen. I mean, it was swollen. That side of my neck was swollen past where your ear is.
That's scary.
It's scary for your child to see you like that.
So your children did see you like that?
Of course, you can't hide it.
Yes, and you're a mom, so there's your own internal meltdown, and then you have to deal with their internal meltdown. That must have been.
And the wound is exposed. They don't cover it with a bandage. It's clear glue. So all of your dried blood is caught under there, and so they see the huge incision, and your face is not your face. Your neck is totally swollen. It's like a movie. I couldn't believe what I was looking at when I'd look in the mirror.
That must have been hard. And for listeners, what advice would you give? Because it sounds like in terms of advocating for your own health, because it sounds like you did have a great team and you got through everything, but it does sound like you have to push really hard because of the statistical group you fell into. But what advice would you give for a woman who's going into a checkup, or anybody, not women, anyone, and like they have this intuitive feeling that something isn't right?
Yes,
what advice?
Push yourself. If I did not have all the capital that I have, of course, we're not talking about monetary capital, right? Like social capital, navigational capital, linguistic capital, having been educated, unfortunately, I think that plays a role in having been able to advocate for myself and push, because my own doctor was like, oh, this is nothing. And I'm like, I know, but I need it to be ultrasounded. And he's like, well, you don't want to cut into this. It's in your nerves. I'm like, I understand, but I need to. So I had to, and then he wouldn't, and then the other thing is, you don't want any surgeon cutting into your neck. You want an expert doing this, not someone who works on these tumors once a year. So the first person he referred me to is someone who only deals with this sort of tumor. And I asked that surgeon, I said, how many times a year do you cut into a tumor like this? Before it was diagnosed, because we knew what family of tumor it was in, right? He said, well, maybe once or twice a year. And in my head, I thought, I can't have someone who works on this. He will butcher my face. He will butcher me. I mean, this surgery is so complicated. I could have been permanent facial paralysis.
Right.
Was probably the worst thing. And then other things like having a droop on the side of your mouth forever. They described so many things. Like sweating is associated with it, discoloration, a lot of things. I can't remember the list of it now. But so coming back to your question, so when my physician was like, I'm going to refer you out, it had to do with my insurance. See, my insurance was contracted with City of Hope, but they were a secondary. It was more money in their pocket for me to go to the person who my insurance was linked with. Because, of course, all those years we had PPO insurance, but the one year we're like, we're tired of paying for PPO. We're going to switch to HMO this year. That's the year I was diagnosed.
Oh my God.
So of course you're freaking out about, oh my God, is my insurance going to cover this? Am I going to die? Who am I going to go to? But luckily City of Hope had entered into a contract with HMO, but that was not the first person they would send you to, because it did not, their pockets were not going to be lined as robustly. So they sent me out. So I knew that I had a right to ask for City of Hope as a secondary opinion. So when I went to the first person who never called me to tell me about my diagnosis, I already knew he was not my first and last stop. But it's because I had a friend who was an oncologist guiding me and telling me these things. If I did not have that friend, I probably would have just gone with this first person who would have butchered me, opened the tumor, been shocked that it was cancer, and God knows what would have happened from there. So yes, advocating for yourself when you know that there is something wrong, even from my primary, all the way through fighting with your insurance and getting what you know is yours, rightfully so. I highly recommend you do not settle. If something seems wrong and something feels wrong, not just physically, but like with what your physicians are telling you, you need to fight, because it's your life, it's your body, and no one else is going to do it for you.
I love that. Don't settle. Don't settle. I love that.
My own primary, who I've had years of relationship with, who I love and I still go to and I respect. And in fact, after my biopsy came in, he called me. He'd never called me before. And he was like, I can't believe that it ended up being carcinoma. And he was like, and he stayed on the phone with me for a long time and kind of made me feel like, encouraged me and said, like, I don't think this is going to take you down. But I think he called because he was also in utter shock. He was speaking so confidently that it was nothing, that he was also shocked.
Right. His advice could have changed the course of your life. So, okay, sitting here now, are you cancer-free?
Yes.
Amen. Praise the Lord.
Amen.
Amen. And I know you did what is super unlikely for anyone to do, because I imagine most people who are diagnosed or in radiation or chemo or treatment, they hit the brakes on their to-do list. And you did the exact opposite, my dear friend. You put both feet on the gas. Walk me through that, because it feels and sounds counterintuitive. So I want you to share your insight. Did that passion and fuel give you more to live for? Can you walk us through that? You wrote, researched, submitted your freaking dissertation, not just anywhere, at UCLA. You did not cut yourself any slack, and you met their deadline. I mean,
yes, when I walked, I had already filed, which was a huge
deal, because I know people who are there cancer-free and they're not battling anything like this and they can hardly get through the program. So why did you put both feet on the gas at that time, at that very nuanced time?
Because I'm a completer.
You are a finisher.
That's my life. I'm a completer. Because in my head, I was like, oh, I can't let this stop me. In my head, although I was scared of death and dying, previous to surgery for sure, I mourned my life every night, cried into a pillow silently, that calculated the age of my children. If I died now, if I die in 2 years, if I die in 5 years, I did all that. But at the same time, I was like, no, I started this program. I've put in all this money. I'm going to finish and I'm not going to stop. Because I felt like I couldn't be a sick person at home, just being sick. Now, I had the luxury of doing that because the type of tumor I had, I won't say have, does not take to chemo. So chemo was not an option.
Okay.
And we know that chemo brings you down. And so I don't know if it's a double-edged sword, because the only treatment option for this cancer is removing it.
Okay.
Radiation was preventative.
Right, but radiation isn't easy.
It was the hardest thing ever. That was very, 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 very difficult because of its location. But because I wasn't down and out like chemo for months on end, I think I was able to move forward. I don't know if I was on chemo, if I would. Now, don't get me wrong. With my radiation, I couldn't eat. It was in my neck. My tongue was swollen. My gums were swollen. My mouth was ready to explode. Everything was burnt to a crisp. I couldn't even swallow my own spit. It was very, very real. And I know this sounds terrible for the listeners, because how dare I make this comparison, but I legitimately felt like, oh my God, if I lived in a third world country where people are suffering from poverty and starvation, I knew for just 6 weeks, or maybe longer than that, maybe 8 weeks, 2 months, what that felt like, because I could not eat any food.
Not even through a feeding tube,
they threatened me with a feeding tube. So I would, my daily, at my worst, my daily intake was half a bottle of Ensure and maybe half a piece of toast for the entire day. Literally, I would break up the pieces of, I'd make pancakes for the kids, and then I would take half the pancake would take me the entire day to eat. And when I say half the pancake, I'm talking just a small round, and maybe you pinch off a piece and you have that piece in your mouth for a long time before you even can muster the courage to swallow it, because it is that painful. And you have no saliva to help you. God, I never knew how important saliva was. I'll tell
Well,
you.
I was gonna say, talk about perspective. Because that really does answer my next question, which was gonna be like, what's the takeaway? And you answered it. That's a lot of perspective, and it's perspective for me too, sitting here because I've seen you then, see you now, but you like are so back to yourself visually. It's hard for me to even imagine that you suffered all this. I'm sure your students don't even imagine that you literally lived this nightmare.
It was a nightmare. The other, also be fair with the question you asked earlier, though, how did I not stop? Because we were still remote. I don't know if I would be able to have gone through, like, I don't know that I'd be able to have gone on campus every single day, not because of how I looked, but because of how I felt. So yeah, I think being remote, and I didn't tell anyone at work. And I asked my radiation oncologist at City of Hope, like, I told him I'm between two colleges, I'm teaching full time, I'm in a doctoral program, I have 2 kids. Do I stop any of this before starting radiation? And he said, no, live your life like you'd continue, like live it normal. And I think he told me that I know it sounds ironic. Obviously he told me that on purpose, but I think he really told me that on purpose because I don't know how I would have gone through radiation had I not had those other things that I had to juggle, because it was can I curse?
Yes.
Fucking miserable time. I can't underscore how fucking miserable it is to have radiation in your neck. Radiation in other parts of your body, I don't want to take it away. Cancer is terrible. It is not the same because your entire fucking mouth is burnt to a crisp. I mean, I can't explain to you what it's like to be so hungry and not be able to eat. It is the worst thing when I was in college, I worked for an oncologist.
That's ironic.
Yeah. And the things I saw as an 18-year-old were very singular. The things that someone died in front of me when I was alone in the office with the physician one day. But aside from death, unfortunately at 18, I'd already seen a lot of death, not in front of my face like that, where he had a heart attack and just died. And I watched the oncologist administer CPR and I had to call the ambulance and I was shaking. And it was actually a patient who I knew. I was the camp leader, the youth group leader for their children. Ironically, they happened to come to this oncologist. It wasn't like I knew other patients at this place. Anyway, one of the patients we had was a tongue cancer diagnosis. And you have to understand, at 18, you don't know much about cancer.
Right.
You don't know that tongue cancer, anal cancer. I did not know that these things existed, that you could have it. I didn't understand what it meant. And I remember when the oncologist told me, well, he doesn't have any, we had to remove his taste buds. And I thought, oh my God, how can you live your life without being able to taste? That to me, and I remember thinking, God forbid, and I am a religious person, God forbid that should ever happen to me. And I did pray to God, like, please, like, let this not happen to me. And then for me to have cancer in the salivary gland, we didn't tell the listeners what it was, and then the radiation impacting my taste buds. I can't say that I'm here, I'm healthy.
But
I don't
can you taste flavor?
I can't taste the way that I did before.
You cannot, or you can?
I cannot.
Do you have any, just describe it as like 80%?
It's so funny. People ask that all the time. I don't know how to answer that. Some foods I can taste very well, and other foods I can't. It depends. Now I think I eat more for texture than taste. I also don't want to be insensitive to my cancer community out there, because I am thriving. I'm cancer-free. I'm totally fine. And my the consequences of it are so minuscule in comparison to what other people are dealing with. And I want to say that. I don't want the listeners to think I'm entitled or don't acknowledge that, or I don't build resentment towards me. I 100% have so much empathy, and I recognize how very lucky I am that even though I was misdiagnosed for 2 years, I was still, when the surgery took place, my margins were clear. They could have easily not been. I have a very dear friend right now who is losing his own battle. It is terrible. I feel like I am watching my friend just die, even though we still have a little bit of hope, but the odds are really have turned against us this last month, and he is younger than me. And he has young children. So I don't want any of the listeners who have cancer or are survivors to think that I take it for granted. But it is very difficult to have experience. During radiation, I couldn't swallow, taste, do anything. It was very terrible. I never want to go back to that. I would go to bed before the hunger pangs would hit. Every morning I'd wake up, and my biggest concern, even though I had papers to grade and students to love and my own children to love and a dissertation to work on, my biggest concern every morning was, oh my God, what am I going to do when I start feeling hungry today because I can't eat? And that moment of dread carried with me for day after day, week after week, month after month, with no end in sight, because radiation is not like, oh, your last day of radiation, tomorrow you could start living it's radiation is the gift that keeps on giving. And even till today, like even in this interview, maybe I'll trip up on words. There's brain fog, and it is 100%. I know it's from the lasting impressions of the radiation, for sure. There's no doubt in my mind.
You have always shown gratitude to that cancer community. You're always so graceful about how lucky you are and being mindful of that. And when you were talking about it, you mentioned you had love to give to your kids, and you said love to my students. And I want to tap into that comment because first of all, it's beautiful that you were loving on them and they were on your mind even during this battle. And now you are, I am going to say my opinion is that you're one of the most popular teachers on campus in the department.
Thank
you literally have a waiting list, and I've seen it. This is my perspective, not Tanya's. This is mine. And kids are begging for you to open up the class because it's capped out at a certain number, and they're begging you to just take the cap down so they can come in. So and
our class remains over the cap, thinking people would drop, but I still have that. Our class is full and then some.
The class that I'm attending, Tanya's English Lit 1B, is bursting at the seams. And so Tanya and I are close in age, and I want to tap into Gen Z because we're not Gen Zers. Gen Zers are, as of this year, 2024, they're the age group of 12 to 27 years old. And Tanya and I are 28. So we're
exactly.
We're a year off, so no biggie. But anyhowsers. So her students are Gen Zers. For me, being in the class as a 37-year-old was shocking because I have little kids. I didn't know what Gen Z was like. And just to give a glimpse, and then I'm going to throw the ball to you, was first day I showed up in your class, I'm there with, a roller bag and a ton of notebooks and pencils and pens to write. And I realized nobody has
the dream student.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking, nobody has pencils or notebooks, and I was confused. And then I realized you wrote 2 words on the board, and everybody's taking a snapshot with their iPhone of the 2 words a professor has written. And I realized, wow, I am in a very different group right now. And I need to acclimate as a student in that class. That's not a Gen Zer. So give us some insight, because a lot of us really don't know much about Gen Zers. We have little itty bitty kids. They're not in that group. You're teaching them. You're with them. You're in tune with their educational needs, their social needs. Just kind of describe the stereotypical Gen Zer. What are they like as students? Are they overly emotional? Are they very dedicated? Some
it's
insight.
Such a mixed bag.
Is it?
And I want to preface this by saying I love all my students, no matter what I'm going to say.
And I want to say you have tremendous students, and I will say that too, because they are really confident in who they are, and I didn't feel that way when I was their age, and
they come off as confident, but I have to say they are not.
Okay.
And it's partially I say that as an assumption, but partially because I have so many students who come and speak to me privately one-on-one.
Okay.
And some of them give you the impression of they are very stoic and know a lot and not know-it-alls. Nobody pretends to be a know-it-all, I have to say, in this generation, but very much self-confident. But the truth is that they're not. So I have some very highly intelligent, they're all intelligent, but demonstratively intelligent students who maybe have had the training because they went to a certain school and they're able to demonstrate that in the class and they know it, or they don't know it. And then I do have other students who really struggle with their skills, but they struggle not because they don't want to be doing well, but because their life circumstances are so difficult.
Right.
And I have to say that they're so much more as a group innocent than you'd ever imagine.
Do tell, because
Yes.
the stigma is, again, these are all speculative and not necessarily true, but the social stigma is that they have a lot of social hangups. One of them that I've heard, and I haven't experienced it, I've heard that like they're not great at making eye contact, and then we can address that. And that they're just not like socially able to be in tune once they walk into a room full of people. That's not the feeling I've gotten in your class, by the way.
Yeah, I think this is very difficult. I think that they're so much more naive and innocent than people realize. I think we have I don't know if as a society or as a community or what, but I think there is a stereotype that exists when students hit college, this like sweet spot of like 18 to 24 years old, where they come in having this generation, they already have sex, they do this, they do have drugs, they have these, but like in reality, so many of them have not. And they're so much less experienced with the adult world than we realize. And I think that we make a mistake by assuming that they have been exposed and then subjecting them to the biases and stereotypes that come with thinking that they've had that exposure. So I'm very careful with assuming that they've had some of those life experiences. What I do assume is that they've had difficult life experiences. Maybe they come from families with language barriers and they've had to be the translator their whole lives. I think that a lot of them have socioeconomic barriers, and many of them live in smaller homes or apartments, just like the living area with maybe they're sharing a lot of their space.
Right.
They haven't had a chance to have quiet or alone time
Right.
that allows you to think about
to do the work. Yeah.
Yes, and to do work. A lot of them need to help financially, and they are working insane hours. And it's a shame that they don't see themselves as intelligent as they actually are. They're so intelligent. They may not have all the writing skills to show it, but it's a skill that they can develop and learn or build on because they have it, but they need to strengthen it, which is fine. But I think that they come in feeling defeated, and they shouldn't. And I think that's what I see in this generation, that there's a lot of lack of confidence, actually, and innocence, and difficult lives that they lead. Not all of them, but I think a lot of them. And that's why I'm so sensitive in the classroom to them. And I repeat things, and I want them to feel and see my love, which is tough love. It is tough love.
You achieve and strike a really difficult balance, and I'm amazed because you are tough. You're a tough professor. Like, you give tough reading, you give homework, and you expect it to be done, and you don't fudge the lines, but you're like their mama bear. You show up and you show them like that tough mama love. You bring them cookies. Some of them, like you were saying, I'll just kind of say as like, because like I'm amongst the people, so because I'm sitting with the students while she's up there at the podium, like some of them were telling me like they're coming from like work. They work at a fast food joint and they didn't have time to eat because they ran across the street to get to class, or they drove literally 2-hour commute, which shocked me. And you, in your own chaotic schedule of the day, bring them food every lesson almost, and it's so. That gesture is so loving and maternal, and I think it's
so
beautiful.
Armenian.
So Armenian.
It really is. It's so, I think like food is such a center of our culture. And I almost feel like there's an expression in Armenian how like you can't show up empty-handed, right, to someone's house. I swear that is the same quote unquote burden, Armenian burden of I can't show up to the class empty-handed, even though which professor is giving them snacks? Probably none of them.
None of them.
I never had a professor bring us. The only time we had snacks was when I was in grad school, and it was like a few times when we had a 8-person class and the professor's like, I'm bringing some wine and cheese from Trader Joe's today. And I was like, this is the coolest day in class ever. And I remember that day because it never happened. And so, yeah, I think like it's the Armenian in me because food is community building. And I'm such a community builder.
You are.
And I feel like I want sense of belonging, this idea, this buzz term in education. I really do subscribe to it. Like everybody needs to feel like they belong. If you don't feel like you belong, how can you be your best? If you feel like an outsider, how can you contribute to the group? And I think like bringing food in helps to build the community.
Right.
And then, eating together is a communal activity.
Yes.
And I don't think they realize that. And to them, it's so like, oh, she brought my favorite cookies from Trader Joe's. Oops, can we name drop brands here? Sorry, I don't know if we can.
Of course, you can say anything. Nothing is off limits, girl. We're going rogue here.
So, but when I see them come up to that's why I'm always like, why aren't you having something? Some students are shy. Others are like taking seconds and thirds and they don't care. And others, I'm like, and then that's why you see me when you're broken up into groups, I'll actually serve the class, right?
Yes.
And I'll walk around because people are too shy to come up. And to them, they're just like, oh, she's so nice. She brought us food. But to me, it's like, it's more than that. It's them letting down their guard. And, eating is a very intimate thing. I mean, you're chewing in front of someone. There's the risk of having food stuck in your teeth and you're sitting with this group who doesn't know you. And, when I'm eating in front of the students, I feel self-conscious, like, oh, is there something in my teeth? Sometimes I'm like, thank God you're in the class because I can ask you to look at my teeth and you're my friend. It'd be weird to ask, but I do ask the students too. Like I have, I don't have all Marys in each of my classes, right? But yeah, there is, like I think that the food brings camaraderie and they don't realize it, but it does. And I think it helps break down their walls to communicate with each other.
And it makes your classroom feel like a home now that I think of it.
I hope so. That is the hope for. There's not much you can do in a community college classroom. In high school, I had decorated my class and I decorated seasonally. I don't mean like winter, summer, but like with the genres of what we're doing as well. If we're doing plays, then I have like imagery that reflects that on the drama on the boards and the walls. In a community college class, the class is not yours. You share that space. So you can't really quote unquote decorate it.
Yeah, you're walking into like a very generic classroom for sure. That's
so
beautiful.
I'm dressing it with the food and my personality and my humor.
And that is colorful. Colorful decor. Wonderful decor. I love it so much. I want to dispel actually a stigma that I had. So like 25 years ago when I went to college, there was this feeling in the air, and a lot of us were kids of immigrant parents. So it was misguided, but it was this feeling of like, if you don't get into university and you go to community college, like that is not something.
A failure.
Yes.
Only the people who couldn't get in go to community. Well, I'm here to proudly tell you, I went to community college. I was a student at Pasadena, and I would do it the same way all over again.
Bada boom, bada bing. That's what I want to talk about because I actually had never, ever stepped foot on a college campus until like 6 months ago and when I registered to be in your class. And I did it out of Well, I was taking you. It's because you were a professor there. But it's also like I have 3 kids. It's, 4 miles from my house. And when I got there, this very unexpected thing happened. I thought, all those years, I bought into this narrative which was completely false. The professors here are just as good, if not better. And then I started asking myself this question, what's the point of spending so much money the first 2 years? Like this is actually a lot more practical. So that's what I wanted to ask you. I've heard there's a big shift. Gen Zers are now realizing that there is no stigma. And most of them are saying, we're going to a community college. It makes more sense. Is that what's happening? In the education world, has community college become more popularized? That's what I'm hearing. That it's a more popular decision. Doesn't have this ugly stigma.
It is. I hope there's no more ugly stigma. I think that community college can offer you something that a university could never. When I transferred to UCLA, I felt like my professors did not care to know me. I remember going to a professor in his office hours so many times. And then I'd come to him in class and he wouldn't even make the connection that I was the same person going to him into his office hours because there were so many students in his section. And he was there particularly to just research. He didn't care. Teaching's a burden to a university professor. Their primary job at a creme de la creme university, I can't speak to all the systems, right? But I was part of the UC system. I was enrolled in the Cal States as well for like single subject credential and a couple of like a post-secondary reading certificate. But in terms of like my undergraduate degree and then my doctoral degree, right? Those were from, UCLA, and my graduate school was at LMU. And those instructors are there to research, not to teach. Teaching is like they've tacked it onto their workload. When you're a community college instructor, you are intentionally choosing to teach, to educate the students in a different way because your full attention is on the student. It is not split with, I need to do the research, which is what the school is expecting of me. And I don't know how the contract for UCs or just universities work with their instructors. I can't speak to that. I don't know how it's split. I don't know what their expectations are, but they are researching, right? And I don't want you to have the wrong idea, or the listeners, or to anyone. I'm not trying to get into trouble here. I've had amazing instructors in the UC system and in the Cal States, but
for sure, but it's a different craft. Teaching
it is a different craft.
And researching are two different categories.
They're two different things. And you are in a community college, your job is to teach these particular students who we know have barriers, more likely these financial, perhaps families of language barrier. I mean, children of immigrants more so than probably in the university system, right? I mean, that is what the stigma is, or the stereotype, or, I mean, that is what the demographics show, right? And you need to teach those students very empathetically. Right. And I am the child of immigrants, and I am a dual identity person and dual language person, and I understand my students because of that. So I think like I teach definitely differently than I would be if I was in a university, where I think students are expected to know certain things when they come through the doors, even though it's not true. I mean, I think the biggest mistake instructors make is assuming students know or have a certain foundation for something and then not reviewing it and expecting them to just know, and so you don't review it and then you just tack on more information. I think that's how students get lost.
Right. That's so interesting. I'm so grateful that I wish I had exposure to community colleges earlier, but I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah, I had wonderful experiences with my professors when I was a community college student.
And it's really full circle. So, because you were there, like, as a student eons ago, and now you're teaching there. That's really cool. That must feel really nice.
And in the same classes, same campus, same everything. And I absolutely, I feel it's a gift. I don't take it for granted. And I love the college and I love the students and the resources we have for the students, and connecting them to those resources. Again, I've been a student in the UC system in the Cal States, but I've never been on the faculty end. So I can't speak and say they don't do those things. But I know that as a faculty member at this college, I am intentionally connecting my students to resources that they need. And I go out of my way to learn about those resources so I can connect them. Like whether it's counseling, or if there's food insecurity, there's like the pantry, or something simple like walking them over to where the library is.
You are the teaching mama bear.
Thank you. I hope they view me as a mama bear.
They really do. I mean,
a tough mama bear, but I have high expectations because I love them. And I think having low expectations is an insult to anybody.
Oh, I love that.
Right?
Say that one more
time. Low of them.
Yes.
I think that's an insult to their intelligence, to their abilities. I think you never want somebody to have low expectations of you.
You're so right. And that's why you're tough love on them. They're not like veered away by that.
I hope.
They're not. That's really cool. And I think you have really high expectations of yourself, which is going to lead me to my next question.
To a heart attack.
Well, I hope not. We've got so much raging to do together. No, you are not having a heart attack, at least not during this podcast, because we have 9 more minutes to go. You're also a mom, and we're in a generation where being a full-time career woman, which you are, really doesn't erase all the other mom duties. They just kind of get tacked on, and now you got to do both. And I've seen you be on that campus until 6 p.m. and then you got to grade 900 papers. And sometimes, like, I've joined some events and you're leading the event, so then you're there until 9:30. Okay. At the end of the day, there's 24 hours. You're one freaking human and you have two really intelligent kids. What is the juggling? Honestly, I mean, I don't believe you can have it. I don't believe anybody. I
No.
do think that's one of the biggest lies that have been sold to women that are very damaging. I believed it when I was in law school. It was sold to me. We were 54% female in my law school class. And there was this like rah, rah, rah. And I galloped into the sunlight with this like beautiful rage in my heart. And then I collapsed when I became a mom because it's a very, very false narrative. Maybe you don't feel that. That's okay. But let's talk about that.
I want. We only have a few minutes left. But I really want to give two very quick pre-stories, and then I'm going to answer that.
Yeah.
So I remember in undergrad at UCLA, one of my professors was. I did not know this at the time. I knew it later. An award-winning novelist, and one of her novels had been turned into a movie with some big stars. And she was actually a sibling of a very high-tech profile person. And I did not know these things till later. And I remember that in one of our classes, she made a comment about, when I go on vacation with and my kids are there, I need to just not be with them for a couple of hours. And I go into my own room for 2-3 hours to do my writing, and they need to be with dad, and they need to da-da-da. And she made this comment about how, like, she didn't say having kids is a nuisance, but she almost joked about it, right? And like how they got in the way of her career. And I thought the Armenian naive stereotypes of what it means to be a woman dictated my opinion of her at that time. And I thought, wow, what a bitch. She's thinking her kids are a nuisance. How dare she? What kind of a woman is this? What kind of a mother is this? And I kind of lost a little bit of respect for her. Shame on me. Fast forward to grad school. In grad school, I had a lovely instructor. I adored her. And she made a comment to the class once. She didn't have children. She was married, but with no children. She obviously had a PhD, and she was carved out a niche for herself in whatever her expertise was. I don't want to reveal too much to reveal her, and so she made a comment to the class, and she said, well, some of you are going to move on to PhDs, and you're going to have to make a choice on having a family or your career. It's either your family or you're going to have a career.
Wow.
And I thought, what is she saying? How could you, what's the big deal? PhD, who cares? And I didn't understand. In my head, I just thought, oh, you get a PhD, you just sit on these degrees or you just continue to teach. I didn't understand what it meant to have these degrees if you wanted to take them all the way. And then I also, when she made that comment, I'm like, my other professor, who's a woman, who's also a badass, she only has one child. And I noticed that many of the professors in grad school either had no children or had one child. And I kind of didn't do much with it, but I observed it and I noticed it. And now I fast forward and I earned this doctorate in the middle of, having 2 young kids, moving forward with cancer and all that stuff, the treatments, not putting it on hold. And you cannot. And so after, you can't have it all is what I mean. And up until I graduated, I had chosen to be adjunct at 2 schools, which together would make a full-time schedule, but you had a lot of flexibility in that schedule. And that was my way of trying to have it all with being with my kids, but also not leaving my career on the sidelines. But now that I have a full-time tenure track position and I have the degree, I decided, well, when am I going to immerse myself in my career, if not in my 40s? Why did I do all this? So yes, the short answer, I suppose, is there is sacrifice. And now my kids are being sacrificed for sure in me wanting to be involved. But it is a sacrifice that I am deliberately making because I also feel that I'm doing it for them.
Absolutely.
And the better my network, the more seeds I plant, I'm hoping that they're going to grow and they will be able to leverage it in the future. Something that as the child of immigrants, I was never able to leverage or have. Because even though my parents did very well, they, my dad went to college and had a good job and tried to provide and et cetera, all that. Like they pushed through these like language barriers, et cetera. And I'm very proud of them. I don't know what, for whatever reason, they did not like plant the seeds quite in the way that I'm thinking I'm planting them, like expanding my network and trying to get my fingers in all these pots, not only because it feeds my soul, but I'm hoping that eventually it's going to somehow, they are going to benefit from it. And if nothing, they're going to think, wow, my mom did so much and she was still able to cook dinner for us. Now, I do miss Little League games here and there, and I don't cook every single night, but I do cook many nights out of the week, and I do try to be present as possible. But am I less available to them? Of course, naturally, there are only 24 hours in the day.
Right. And thank you for that very honest description, which I think is still a secret, kind of a cultural community secret. Most people are not comfortable saying that, but that was really, really raw. And I wanted to tap into, how you mentioned you're very passionate about your job, but it's great that your kids will hopefully leverage that. And that's so true because a lot of it is social capital. And I feel like I learned that when I got into law school. You could be really smart, but if you haven't built any social capital and
life is hard.
Yeah, it's not that easy to get a job. It's not that easy to send an email and have someone respond. So it's really beautiful that two kids can see mom really take life by, the horns and build something that they will benefit
I
from.
hope. Or they're going to be resentful and bitter that mom was absent some of the time.
Definitely not. And if that's the case, we'll have a part 2 for this podcast.
Right. 10 years from now, cruising into my 50s.
Oh my gosh. Well, we can talk forever. I do want to end this beautiful conversation with gratitude for our friendship. We're like a married couple. When you ask a married couple, like who kissed who first, they both have a different story. And we have a different story of when and how we met, which is so funny, but and we don't know who's right or who's wrong. I feel like I'm right about when we met. I thought we met at a wedding, but
it was the bridal shower.
But she thinks we met at a bridal shower. Anyhow, the point is that it was really love at first sight. You have been an incredible friend. I've learned so much from you. I've watched you through highs and some lows we discussed today. You always come out on top. And I just want to thank you for imparting all your wisdom.
I love you.
I love you too.
You're also badass.
Thank you, Dr.
And
Baronian.
thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, listeners. Catch you on the next one. Dear listeners, if you like what you heard, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple, and follow me on my journey on Instagram and YouTube. Until next time.